Welcome to the Cancer Has No Borders podcast. I'm Zach Randles-Friedman. Today, my guest is Melika Davis. Melika is SVP, Global Head of Clinical Operations. She joined the company in 2019, and she dedicated her career to transforming clinical trials on a global scale. Welcome to the show, Melika.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I wanted to start off and just kind of talk about how did you choose to study biology?
I love biology since I was a child. When I was 7 years old, I got my first microscope. And so I looked at everything under that microscope. And so it was clear to me that I wanted to be in biology, and I continued that, through high school and also through college in France and also in the United States.
Great. And you started your career out at MD Anderson, and you were doing cancer research in the labs. Tell me a little bit about what you were doing there and kind of after you graduated school, like what drove you there?
Yeah, so when I graduated school, I was already really interested in cancer specifically because at that time we didn't know exactly how it worked. So I got a job with MD Anderson doing research in skin cancer. And that was really awesome because I started learning a little bit more about the pathways, that cancer was targeting. So I did that for a few years, and then after that, that was my academic experience. And then after that, I actually moved into the pharmaceutical industry where I also did research in the labs, but this time was more focused on specific molecules, and I actually sequenced, some of these molecules and published them. And so probably biologists would know, I worked on RAS protein and also the RAF protein and its interaction, and finding compounds to separate the bonding that was happening, because we thought at that time if we disrupt this, then we would be able to stop cancer.
Why did you kind of choose cancer, though, out of anything that you could have gone in and done research? Was there any impact in that personally in your life?
Yes, there was an impact, of course, in my life. I had in my family, I had family members that had cancers, and so and we didn't know exactly what it was. And sometimes also, I also had a member of the family, an aunt that was diagnosed, but we weren't sure that it was cancer. So I think there was misdiagnoses that were happening at that time. So focusing on cancer, what also was really fascinating for me is that at that time, we knew that cancer cells were growing uncontrollably. And I always thought this is really interesting because it's very different from a normal cell. So if we are able to find out how they actually grow uncontrollably like that, we could find the key of life. Because if we can stop that growth, we would be able to moderate, how a cell functions. Are we there yet? We're not there yet. I think that's fascinating too.
And then you moved over to Schering-Plough, and you were in the labs there. And what type of research were you doing there?
So at Schering-Plough, that's what I was doing, actually. So okay. I was working on the RAS and RAF proteins in the labs.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Another great company, Novartis, you ran their global monitoring operations. Tell me a little bit about your role there.
Yes. So when I joined Novartis, it was not in the research space, but more in the clinical clinical research space. Just to back up a little bit, at Schering-Plough, I did research, but I also did clinical research.
Okay.
So this is where I learned, how clinical research were all set up, and I did that for its different therapeutic areas. Okay. But when I came to Novartis, I worked in the oncology business unit, and there I was responsible for the monitoring organization, so the clinical research associates monitoring clinical trials. I started doing this in the United States, so managing the team in the United States, but then I created the global organization for the business unit specifically.
And why a global organization? Just so you could get different populations of people in clinical trials?
Yeah, exactly. So it's really ensuring that we had global trials as well.
Yeah.
And a model that is set up in one country can be duplicated across other countries as well. I think what is important in clinical operation is making sure that we have the right standards across the board.
Yeah.
Not standards in each of the countries or each regions. So we did that across the board, and it's bringing the whole team together. Having a focus on the vision and the mission of those clinical trials is extremely important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So you were at Novartis for 15 years. What actually drove you to come and want to be at BeiGene?
So when I was at Novartis, then I started being responsible for the monitoring organization then in the oncology business unit. I was then fortunate, to be asked to do the same thing, so building the organization also, but in the vaccine division, which I did. Now, the vaccine division and the BU actually had a culture of biotech, which I also really enjoyed. That will come up, a little bit later when I tell you why I came here to BeiGene. And then I had so in the vaccine division, we actually did really well. We brought the quality to a very high standard, which was excellent. And as this was also going, we then were bought by GSK. So probably people know that there was a swap, right? And we moved in. So I worked with the GSK organization to make sure that all of this was done, help them, build their infrastructure, and then transition my team. I then came back to Novartis, and I was responsible for the development quality assurance organization, development QA organization. I did that for about 3 years. Now, having done all of this, what I learned as a leader is that, and even for me, I wanted to go back into clinical operation. I really like the development part, the clinical setting. And so, and I also wanted to get back into the biotech culture. So then I looked for a company that would have some criteria. So as a clinical operations person, I had, some criteria. So one of the criteria was a company that has that biotech feel where people work together, and really have that sense of urgency, make decisions quickly. And so that was one criteria. The second criteria was I didn't want to go to a startup company where you didn't have a product on the market. So I wanted to make sure that we had at least a product on the market. At the time that I joined BeiGene 6 years ago in 2019, there were already some products that were on the market in one country, but not globally. So I knew that the next wave was going to be, let's place those assets globally, which I could help. And so BeiGene fit that criteria with Brukinsa and with Tevimbra as well. So.
And just kind of talking a little bit about working at like a pharmaceutical company, especially a big company like Novartis and GSK, is it also that the process and just like it's harder to make any real headway to get things done because they're so big?
And that's the danger of being in a very big company, because you do have, a bigger bureaucracy, let's say, or you have to go through many different layers to get an approval. But there are pockets, in some of those where you can make these decisions, but there aren't that many. So, yes.
So BeiGene was just a good fit for you, for what you were looking for, and it kind of checked all the boxes off for your next step.
There was also the fact that, being bold was extremely important also for me. So if we have an idea and we want to, really look into it, could we do it? And we can. I mean, at BeiGene, I've done that since the day one, and I really love that. Now, why is that? It's because that was my last criteria, is to have an executive leadership team, especially the senior executives that value and really understand how clinical operations work. And I was fortunate, to find John Euler, because he understands, quite well clinical operation, as well as Dr. Lai Wang, who is my boss, the head of R&D, who really understands and value clinical operations. So that was a key criteria for me. Yes.
So did you kind of have, I don't want to say free realm, but were you able to kind of come in and say, this is what I want to do, and they were okay with you doing that?
Yeah. So we had an exchange, right? The vision that John and Lai had was really important for me. And then, of course, when I said, absolutely, we can make that happen, and here's we're going to get it done, they were very supportive. Of course, they gave me, some input as well, which is welcome. And absolutely.
And tell me how your role has changed the 6 years that you've been here at BeiGene. Like what's, you got brought in and you were here, and now we'll talk about the successes that you've had, but tell me a little bit what's changed over the last 6 years.
Yeah. So the role has not changed all that much, if I can say. I mean, technically, maybe yes, because more responsibilities have been given to me. But to me, what I set to do right from day one is what I continue to do. I want to build the best organization.
Yeah.
That takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. But I want to build the best clinical operation organization that can be a role model also for the industry. And we continue to make that happen. My team is just amazing, coming together to get this done.
Can you tell me when and how did you achieve having clinical trials done 100% internally? Because that is, I mean,
Yes.
that's pretty rare.
Yes.
And I think that is a huge,
Yeah.
that's huge. And yeah, so tell me how that happened.
So the understanding, at the beginning with John and Lai is that we needed to take a look at how we worked in clinical operations. At that time, in 2019, we were fully outsourced. All of our studies were fully outsourced.
Across the
to
world,
vendors
right?
across the world. Yes, it was. And in one country, there were already an internalization that had started. But the idea was we need to globalize everything. And then my experience anyway, I felt that we needed to bring as much internal as possible and as quickly as we could. But we needed to build the infrastructure. The infrastructure was not there yet. So what we all agreed is, yes, we need to go ahead and do the internalization. There was a directive also from Lai to make that happen. We started this in 2020. So we looked at how to get it done, and we put all of our infrastructure in place, all of our plan in place first. And really the implementation started in 2021, where we started doing all of the internalization. That's a huge amount of work.
It's a huge amount of work.
It's about setting the right structure, making sure that we had the right roles and responsibilities, that we had the right talent in the right places, that we had the right processes, that we had the right systems, and then shifting all of the clinical trials into our environment.
Yeah.
So, and operations people really will understand. We had 60-something trials at that time.
Wow.
We did not internalize all 60 trials, within that year, but it takes time to do the internalization. So now you're talking 4 years down the line. We are at 95% of all of our studies. Actually, more than that, more than 95% of our studies are all handled internally.
Okay.
In 2021, though, so in 2020, we did all of our changes, all of that during COVID.
Yeah,
by
I was
the
going
way,
to ask you about that.
which
'Cause
is
that's-
another big story
Yeah.
because we had a lot of studies that were in flight, so we needed to take care of all of this. But we got our plans done. 2021, we started our internalization. But in 2021, all new studies were handled 100% internally.
Okay.
Right. So we had a hybrid model for a few years, and then now, we are 100%. I mean, that's pretty much where we are.
That's an amazing accomplishment.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about what the benefits are. Let's start with the patients first of doing clinical trials internally.
So for patients specifically, I've always thought that it's the best way of getting access to innovative medicines, period. And specifically when we talk about cancer patients, if we talk about terminal cancer patients, it is one avenue to get the best of the best of the research. And in some cases, you are at the edge of research. I take CAR T as an example. I think it's amazing what has been done, in this field. When was it? About 6 years ago or so, maybe 7 years ago, when it was announced. I mean, people did not know if they were terminal. If you got CAR T, you actually reverted. So that's a miracle for me.
Yeah.
So that's how I see it. Patients, when they go into clinical trials, it can be overwhelming for them because they have to go through multiple visits, multiple assessments, and it can be really overwhelming. So they need the support, as they go through that. However, that is necessary for researchers to really understand how the disease is functioning, works, and how can, is the product really working or not? So we have to constantly monitor what is happening. So doctors have to do that, nurses have to do this, we have to do this as sponsors as well. So in fact, patients are we micromanage,
Yeah. Yeah.
how patients are doing, and I think that's a huge benefit because then their safety is guaranteed. I mean, we really have to make sure that they are okay.
Yeah. And from a company perspective, why is it? What's the benefit of a company of BeiGene doing this internally?
You mean clinical trial
Yeah.
or the studies internally?
Yeah, the studies internally.
Yeah, so for us to do our clinical trials internally is important because we then have a better control of our data. It's actually data and documents that we are generating. We have better relationships with the institutions, with the clinical sites, with the doctors and the nurses. So we can build, those relationships and also, be able to passionately talk about our portfolio,
Yeah.
talking about, what we want to do, and then hearing what they have to say as well, because it's a partnership that we have with them. There are other benefits, is a cost benefit as well that we see. And then what else?
Speed.
Speed, yes, exactly, absolutely. How could I forget that?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So speed in that we can all work together. So this is what we've seen actually is when we all work together,
Yeah.
because we're all part of one company, we're able to really identify where the white gaps, the white spaces are, and then close these gaps. And we've been able to do this. Actually, we have a lot of really good metrics that are coming out this year for phase one, for early clinical development, let's say. Early clinical development, we're able to start our clinical trial extremely fast now, which is great.
And what about kind of the collaboration with other teams outside of yours? Is that
Correct.
a huge benefit as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. So when teams come together, that's what I mean. It's actually it's everybody in the company that is focusing on or contribute to the start of a clinical trial, the enrollment of a clinical trial. They all come together. Yeah, this is not just clinical operation.
Yeah.
Correct.
Great. And how important are clinical trials for research?
Yeah, so that's what I was saying, also about the patients. The clinical trials are extremely important to understand the safety, of that product, but also the efficacy of that product.
Yeah.
And the sooner we find, good products that are able to, revert or control, the disease, the better the research gets.
Yeah.
It's a cumulative effect.
Yeah.
So every time that we get information, it can be good or bad for that matter, because it can be positive or negative results. Those results are actually telling us a little bit more about how cancer cells work, for example.
Yeah. And I do interviews with patients and caregivers as well. And can you talk about what the benefit of it is for the patient? Because I mean, they're getting so much extra care. They're getting almost hyper care, right? Whenever they're going into a clinical trial. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yes, so they do get the hyper care. They get the hypercare from the doctors, and they get, of course, indirectly, they're getting the hypercare from us as well. So that's the huge benefit for them. I think it's for them, but it's also for their family, as well. They're closer, their close environment. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really the benefit that they're getting.
Yeah, whenever I interviewed a patient a few months ago, his wife, who was his caregiver, was basically saying that she just was blown away by the care that you get in a clinical trial. It's night and day compared to going for a regular treatment, and because you're doing follow-ups and they want to continuously check on you. So it's just she was so grateful for that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying. You have all of these visits that they have to attend to, and yes, and then that there is also follow-up visits, like you said, which is true. And also, if clinical trials actually end, because there is a point in time where it actually ends, then we also, as sponsors, want to make sure that if they need, this innovative product to continue to control their disease, then we will continue, to provide that for them. So we follow them from beginning to end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know we're doing clinical trials all over the world, but how many countries are we currently in? And tell me a little bit about the importance of having these diverse populations in clinical trials.
Yes, yes. So we are currently we're in 46 countries
Wow.
in all continents. Depending on where you're on the world, maybe continents are a little bit different. So maybe I can say, we are in Asia and Asia Pacific, we are in the Americas,
Yeah.
and we are in Europe, Middle East. Actually, not Middle East, but Europe and Africa.
Okay.
Yeah,
And how important is it to have that
the
diversity?
diversity. Yes. So it is extremely important actually to have diverse patients in clinical trials and as early as possible. So the one reason is because the different populations, actually different diverse populations, will react differently to a product. It could be genetic, it can be different things, but the earlier we identify that, the better, so that we can tailor the right clinical trial for those diverse patients as well.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say is, of course, one thing that we have to do when we conduct our clinical trials is that we need to make sure that we represent the country population. So these patients that are coming into our clinical trials should represent the country population that
Yeah.
we are studying in that country.
Yeah, so if you're talking about, doing a clinical trial in Asia Pacific compared to, let's say, Africa, are you getting completely different results based on the diversity of the population?
It depends. It depends. So it can be, because of the differences in genetics, it could be that you see different signals.
Yeah.
And so we have to be really careful because some of the safety profile may be a little bit different.
Yeah.
The efficacy may be the same, but the safety may be different. Or maybe the efficacy is a little bit different as well.
Yeah.
So we have to take a look at that. But usually we conduct global trials. Right. So if there are some differences, then we would conduct specific trials for that diverse population. Yes.
Great. What do you want to achieve next? I mean, you've had a huge accomplishment here already.
Yes. Yes.
What's the next on your list or what's your goals to achieve next in this area?
Yes. Yes. So remember I talked to you about the vision that I had about
Yeah.
5, 6 years ago. There is a little bit more to accomplish. We're still not there yet. But for me, what I'm focusing actually in 2025 with my team is the technology part.
Okay.
It's actually really focusing on the digital. How can digital, whatever, machine learning, AI,
yeah.
whichever else, can really support us to be a lot more efficient and a lot more productive. And when I say that, what I see is that we do a lot of work, manual work. And because we get a lot of data, I mean, we constantly, receive data. I think it is important for us that we identify issues very early on, that we identify, signals very early on. And to do that, we need to be in a predictive state. And the predictive state, only technology can help us to get that done. I think we can, throw a lot of bodies and people to do all of this, but it will take a long time. So if we can use AI or any other technologies that can help us do this, the sooner we see that there are issues, that we can predict that there are issues, we can stop them, fix them right there. And to me, clinical trials would go a lot faster if that happens.
Yeah. So do you think AI is a game changer across the whole industry?
It is a game changer,
Yeah.
but it's not the game changer.
Okay.
I think there is a lot more to do around this. There are clinical trials has a myriad of complex processes.
Yeah.
And one needs to understand these processes and how they work. To throw AI in some places is not going to be enough. We need to do more than that. Yeah, what it is, don't ask me, because we're actually looking into it right now to understand, where do we need to start to make it really, really well. Bottom line, the sooner we get the data, the faster we can make a decision.
Yeah.
That's what's important for patients, and that's what is important for us as well.
And where do you want to go next from I don't want to say country or continent, but in a way, is there another area of the world that you think that we're missing that you want to start clinical trials in?
Yeah, we're actually looking in what we call new markets, which would be, Middle East, Africa, some countries in Asia as well, countries in Latin America as well. So we're looking into this right now to see, where else should we be expanding. We are working with our medical affairs team, of course, to understand the landscape. You know that as a company, we want to, provide these medicines to as many,
Yes.
patients as possible around the world. And so it doesn't matter, which country they are, they should have access to it. Now, how do we make that happen? On a clinical trial world, it's a little bit different than on the commercial world.
Yeah.
There are a lot more restrictions, more regulations, right? We need to be really careful about how we conduct our clinical trials in all, in the different countries.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're partnering right now, and we've been partnering with our medical affairs team, commercial team, clinical development team, to just make sure we're going into the right countries and also into the right sites.
Yeah. Great. I have my last question is a little personal, but do you ever take a moment to stop? Because at BeiGene, everything that we all do is for patients. And I've worked at many pharmaceutical companies, and you hear, oh, patients are the center of everything we do. I think this is the first company where it really feels like it's accurate. It's 100% the truth. Yeah. Do you ever, as running these clinical trials, do you ever take a moment to say, wow, what I'm doing is saving lives, is changing a family's life, is having somebody possibly keep their father or their mother or their child? Yes. Do you ever stop for a moment ever and just reflect back on that?
That's a great question. Of course, I do and we do. Do we do that every day? Maybe not enough. And that's because we constantly are working, we're heads down, working really hard to get it all done. However, there are numerous times when I'm sitting at a meeting,
yeah,
right, or I'm doing a task and I'm thinking, is this really going to help a patient?
Yeah,
maybe I don't need to be here. Maybe I don't need to do this task, and this helps me prioritize my work as well. So personally, that's what it does to me. Where I get that feeling is when we see the data. Once we start seeing the data and we're seeing, we have, a partial response or a complete response, I get ecstatic when I see all of this. This is where I'm saying definitely we're making an impact. Yeah. And there are many more, of course, when we launch, we celebrate, as well. I love hearing, the patient's journey when they go through their clinical trials. I think that really has a huge impact.
Do you ever meet any of the patients that have gone through your...
We meet them only when they come in and talk to us about it, right? Because in clinical trial, we cannot be in contact with the patients.
I understand, yeah.
Yeah, but when we hear their story, when we invite them and they tell us about their story, it's so moving.
It is.
It's just amazing, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on. This was, is there anything else you'd want to say kind of just about the overall program that you're running? And
so around patients, just one last thing that I want to say, because we're also working with our patient advocacy group, which is actually amazing. We're doing, and because of that, we're able to talk to patients as well. They look at our protocol, they look at how we functions, and they're giving us feedback.
Yeah.
And that to me is extremely important. So we started doing that last year. We will continue, of course, to make that happen. And then we're also working with many different foundations as well. So this is where, you asked me about going, to other countries. And that is also something that we're looking into. And I'm really excited, actually, to partner with the foundations to not only give them these innovative drugs, but also place clinical trials in their countries.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for being on.
Yes.
I'm like I said, I think you should be so proud of the accomplishments you've made, especially in 6 years. So thank you for being on.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me.
Be sure to follow us and subscribe to our podcast on Amazon, Spotify, Apple, or iHeart. You can also subscribe to the video version of the podcast on YouTube. Thanks so much.